The building is on fire. Flames are pouring out of the windows. Black smoke is billowing into the sky. The heat is so intense you can feel it from across the street. Every rational cell in your body is screaming one message: get away, run, survive. Everyone is running out. Parents carrying children, people stumbling through smoke. The crowd is moving in one direction, away from the fire, away from the danger, away from death. And then you see them, the firefighters, moving in the opposite direction, not hesitantly, not reluctantly, deliberately, purposefully, running toward the building that everyone else is fleeing. They know what's inside: heat that can melt metal, smoke that can suffocate in seconds, floors that can collapse without warning, walls that can cave in. The possibility of death is not theoretical. It's concrete, immediate, real, and yet they run toward it. This isn't ignorance. They're not unaware of the danger. They've been trained to understand exactly what fire can do. They know the statistics. They know the stories. They've probably lost colleagues. They know that every time they enter a burning building, there's a chance they won't come out, but they go anyway. Why? What happens in the brain of someone who can override the most fundamental human instinct, the instinct to preserve your own life, and choose instead to risk it for a stranger? What psychological mechanism allows someone to hear screaming from inside a collapsing structure and think, "I need to get in there," when every fiber of their being should be saying, "I need to get out of here"? This is not the same as a soldier running toward enemy fire. Soldiers are fighting. There's adrenaline. There's aggression. There's us versus them. Firefighters aren't fighting an enemy. They're fighting physics, chemistry, time, and they're doing it to save people they've never met. This is pure altruism under the most extreme conditions, and it's one of the most psychologically fascinating behaviors humans are capable of. Most people will never face this choice. Most people will never know if they could do what firefighters do. Because the truth is, until you're standing at that threshold, watching smoke pour out of a doorway, hearing someone screaming for help inside, you don't know if you'll run toward it or away from it. Firefighters know. They've made that choice dozens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of times. And each time, they choose danger. They choose the fire. They choose the possibility of dying to give someone else the possibility of living. But here's what people don't understand. This choice isn't made in the moment. Not really. It's made long before. It's made during training. It's made during selection. It's made when you decide to become a firefighter in the first place. Because by the time you're standing at that door, the decision has already been encoded in your nervous system. You're not choosing anymore. You're executing. This is trained courage. And it's built through repetition, through exposure, through a very specific kind of psychological conditioning that rewires how you respond to danger. But it's also more than that. Because even with training, even with conditioning, there's something else that has to be present. A quality that can't be taught. A willingness to value someone else's life more than your own, at least in that moment. A capacity for selflessness that goes beyond logic, beyond self-interest, beyond the survival instinct that defines almost every living creature. Psychologists have studied this. They've tried to understand what makes someone capable of this level of heroism, and what they've found is complex. It's not one thing. It's a combination of personality traits, life experience, values, training, and sometimes trauma. Some firefighters come from families of firefighters. They grew up watching this modeled. It's normalized. It's what men in their family do. Others come from backgrounds where they witnessed helplessness, where they saw people suffer and couldn't do anything, and they vowed never to be helpless again. Others are seeking meaning, purpose, a way to make their life matter. But regardless of why they started, they all share one thing. They've learned to quiet the part of the brain that says, save yourself, and amplify the part that says, save them. And that psychological shift, from self-preservation to other preservation, is one of the most remarkable things a human can do. This isn't about adrenaline junkies. This isn't about people who lack fear. Most firefighters will tell you they feel fear, every single time, but they've trained themselves to act anyway, to feel the fear, acknowledge it, and then step into the fire. Because someone has to. Because if they don't, people die. And for them, Living with the knowledge that they could have saved someone and didn't is worse than the possibility of dying while trying. So this is about the psychology of heroism, the neuroscience of altruism, the training that creates courage, and the cost of carrying that responsibility every single day. Let's talk about what's happening in the brain when a firefighter runs toward danger instead of away from it. Because this goes against everything evolution programmed us to do. The amygdala is your brain's alarm system. When it detects threat, it triggers the fight-or-flight response. Adrenaline floods your system. Your heart rate spikes. Blood redirects to your muscles. Your pupils dilate. Your body is preparing to either fight the threat or flee from it. For 99.9% of human history, this response kept us alive. The people who ran from fire survived. The people who ran toward fire died. Natural selection favored self-preservation. So we're hardwired at the most fundamental level to avoid danger. But firefighters have to override that hardwiring. And they do it through a combination of training, cognitive reappraisal, and activation of different neural pathways. First, training creates habituation. The amygdala learns through experience. The first time you're exposed to fire in a controlled training environment, your amygdala screams danger. But as you're exposed repeatedly and survive each time, the amygdala recalibrates. Fire becomes familiar. It's still recognized as dangerous, but it's no longer treated as novel. And familiarity reduces the intensity of the fear response. This is stress inoculation. By the time a firefighter responds to their first real call, they've already been in hundreds of simulated fires. Their nervous system has learned, this is dangerous, but we can handle this. But habituation alone doesn't explain running toward danger, because knowing you can survive fire is different from choosing to enter it to save someone else. That requires a second mechanism, value-driven motivation. The prefrontal cortex, particularly the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, VMPFC, is involved in processing values and making decisions based on those values. When a firefighter sees someone in danger, their VMPFC activates. It's computing. Someone needs help. Helping people is my core value. My core value outweighs my personal risk. This isn't conscious deliberation. It happens in milliseconds. But it's a cognitive process that can override the amygdala's fear signal. The prefrontal cortex is essentially saying to the amygdala, yes, this is dangerous. But this is what we do. This is who we are. There's also the role of empathy and mirror neurons. When you see someone suffering, mirror neurons in your brain activate the same regions that would fire if you were suffering. You feel their pain. You feel their fear. And for most people, this creates a desire to help, but from a safe distance. For firefighters, this empathic response has been coupled with action through training. They don't just feel the distress. They've been conditioned to respond to it by moving toward it. The empathic activation directly triggers the action response. Then there's dopamine. Dopamine is released in anticipation of reward. For firefighters, the reward isn't money or fame, it's saving a life. And that reward is so powerful, so neurochemically satisfying, that it can motivate behavior that seems irrational from a survival perspective. Studies on altruism show that helping others activates the brain's reward centers, particularly the ventral striatum. This is the same region that lights up when you eat chocolate or win money. Saving someone's life creates a massive dopamine release, and over time, the brain learns to associate running toward danger with that reward. This isn't conscious. Firefighters aren't thinking, I'll get a dopamine hit if I save this person. But their brain has learned the pattern: danger, action, rescue, profound satisfaction. And that pattern becomes self-reinforcing. There's also identity. Neuroscience shows that your sense of self is encoded in the default mode network. When firefighters think about who they are, firefighter is central to that identity. And when your identity is threatened, when you're faced with a situation that asks, are you really who you say you are? The brain activates motivation to act in accordance with that identity. Not running into the fire would create cognitive dissonance. The internal narrative is, I'm a firefighter. Firefighters save people. If I don't go in, I'm not a firefighter. And resolving that dissonance by acting in alignment with identity is more powerful than the fear of death. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the bonding hormone. It's released during social connection. But it also plays a role in courage. Studies show that oxytocin can reduce amygdala reactivity and increase prosocial behavior, including willingness to take risks to help others. Firefighters often describe a deep bond with their crew. They're not just co-workers. They're brothers and sisters. And that bond, that oxytocin-mediated connection, can override self-preservation. Because you're not just saving a stranger. You're upholding the code of your crew. You're protecting the people who depend on you to do your job so they can do theirs. Then there's the suppression of the default mode network during action. When firefighters are actively engaged in a rescue, brain imaging would likely show reduced activity in the regions associated with self-reflection. They're not thinking about themselves. They're in task mode. Pure focus. Pure execution. This is similar to flow state. The self that would be afraid is temporarily offline. There's just the mission, the person to save. The next step. Finally, there's neuroplasticity. Every time a firefighter chooses courage over fear, they're strengthening the neural pathways that make that choice easier next time. Courage is a muscle, and it gets stronger with use. So when you see a firefighter run into a burning building, understand that multiple brain systems are at play. Habituation reducing fear. Values overriding survival instinct. Empathy driving action. Identity demanding alignment. Oxytocin bonding them to their crew. And dopamine rewarding the behavior. This isn't recklessness, it's not a death wish. It's a highly trained, neurologically supported, value-driven choice. And it's one of the most beautiful things the human brain is capable of. Not everyone who wants to be a firefighter becomes one. And not everyone who becomes one stays. There's a selection process, both formal and informal, that filters for very specific psychological traits. Who chooses this? The motivations vary, but there are common patterns. Some come from legacy families. Firefighting runs in their blood. Their father was a firefighter. Their grandfather. It's tradition, it's identity. They grew up hearing stories, seeing the uniform, understanding the sacrifice. For them, it's not a choice in the traditional sense. It's destiny. It's what their family does. Others come from backgrounds of helplessness. Maybe they witnessed something traumatic as a child, a house fire, a car accident, a medical emergency, and they felt powerless. They vowed never to feel that way again. Firefighting gives them agency, control, the ability to be the help that once wasn't there for them. Some are seeking meaning. They tried other careers and felt empty. They wanted to do something that mattered. Something where at the end of the day, they could point to a tangible impact. I saved a life, I protected a family, I made a difference. Others are drawn to the brotherhood. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want camaraderie, loyalty, the kind of bond that only forms when you trust someone with your life. Firefighting offers that in a way few other professions do, and some, honestly, are adrenaline-driven. They want the rush, the intensity, the challenge. Normal jobs feel boring. They need more. Firefighting provides that without the moral ambiguity of combat. But wanting to be a firefighter and being suited for it are different things. The selection process weeds out people who can't handle it. Physical tests are obvious. You need strength, endurance, agility, but that's table stakes. The real filter is psychological. During academy training, recruits are exposed to extreme stress. Live fire training, confined space simulations, smoke so thick you can't see your hand in front of your face. Scenarios designed to induce panic. Some recruits freeze, some panic, some make dangerous mistakes, and those people wash out, not because they're weak, but because the job requires a specific psychological profile, the ability to function under extreme stress without panicking. But it's not just about not panicking. It's about decision-making under pressure. In a burning building, You have seconds to assess and act. Wrong decisions kill people. Training teaches pattern recognition, tactical thinking, and the ability to stay cognitive when your body is in fight or flight mode. Teamwork is non-negotiable. Firefighting is never solo. You're part of a crew. You trust them. They trust you. If you can't work as a team, you're out. So recruits are tested on their ability to communicate, to follow orders, to lead when necessary, and to subordinate ego for the mission. There's also exposure therapy built into training. Recruits are put in progressively more intense scenarios. Each time, they survive. Each time, their confidence builds. Each time, their nervous system recalibrates. By graduation, entering a fire feels manageable. Not easy, but manageable. But training doesn't end at academy. Ongoing drills are constant. Because skills decay, confidence can waver, complacency can creep in. So firefighters train weekly, sometimes daily. They rehearse scenarios. They test equipment. They maintain muscle memory. And here's the critical part. Training isn't just physical and tactical, it's psychological conditioning. Firefighters are trained to suppress their self-preservation instinct and prioritize the mission. They're trained to see civilians in danger and react with immediate action, not deliberation. This is done through repetition and positive reinforcement. Every time you successfully complete a rescue in training, your brain encodes. Running toward danger, success. Over time, that becomes automatic. There's also normalization of risk. When you talk about fire, injury, and death every day, when you run drills that simulate worst-case scenarios, when you hear stories from veterans who've been through it, risk becomes normal. It's not ignored. It's integrated. Firefighters develop what psychologists call realistic optimism. They know the job is dangerous, they know people die. But they also believe, I'm trained, I'm prepared, I can handle this. And that belief allows them to act. But there's a darker side to this conditioning. Sometimes the suppression of self-preservation extends too far. Some firefighters take unnecessary risks. They push too hard. They ignore warning signs. Because the culture valorizes heroism and sometimes conflates caution with cowardice. This is why leadership matters. Good fire chiefs and captains know when to pull back. They know when the risk is too high. They protect their crews from themselves. Bad leadership lets ego and bravado drive decisions. And people die. So selection filters for people who can handle danger. Training molds them into people who run toward it. But the best firefighters are the ones who've found balance, who are courageous without being reckless, who value life, including their own, who understand that you can't save anyone if you're dead. And that balance is hard to teach. It's learned through experience, through close calls, through loss. It's the wisdom that comes from surviving long enough to understand the difference between courage and stupidity. Not all firefighters are driven by the same thing. Let's explore the different psychological profiles. The legacy carrier. This firefighter comes from a firefighting family. It's in their blood. They're not doing this to prove anything. They're doing it because it's who they are. It's tradition, identity. When they put on the uniform, they're honoring their father, their grandfather, everyone who came before. The advantage is deep commitment. This isn't just a job, it's heritage. The disadvantage is sometimes they feel trapped, like they can't leave even if they want to because it would dishonor the family. The redeemer. This firefighter is trying to fix something from their past. Maybe they failed to help someone once. Maybe they witnessed tragedy and did nothing. Maybe they carry guilt from childhood. Firefighting is their way of making amends. Every life saved is a small redemption. The advantage is intense motivation. They will push harder than anyone because they're not just saving others. They're saving themselves. The disadvantage is they can be reckless. They'll take unnecessary risks because the internal need to redeem outweighs the instinct to survive. The protector. This firefighter sees themselves as a guardian. They're driven by a deep sense of duty. Someone has to stand between the innocent and danger, and they've chosen to be that person. This is often rooted in strong moral values or religious faith. They believe this is their calling. The advantage is unwavering reliability. They'll show up. Every time. The disadvantage is they can develop a savior complex. They struggle to accept when they can't save everyone. The adrenaline seeker. This firefighter is drawn to the intensity. Normal life is boring. They need the rush, the danger, the high-stakes decisions. Firefighting provides that in a socially acceptable way. The advantage is they perform well under pressure. They're energized by chaos. The disadvantage is they can become addicted to the adrenaline. They might take unnecessary risks just to feel alive. And they often struggle with civilian life between calls. The connector. This firefighter is here for the brotherhood. They want to be part of a team. They value the bonds that form when you trust someone with your life. The camaraderie is the reward, not the glory. The advantage is they're excellent team players. They support their crew. They build morale. The disadvantage is they might struggle to make independent decisions. And if the crew culture is toxic, they'll follow it rather than challenge it. The craftsman. This firefighter loves the technical aspects, the equipment, the tactics, the problem solving. Firefighting is a puzzle to solve. How do you ventilate this building? What's the best approach? They're intellectually engaged. The advantage is they're highly skilled. They know the job inside and out. The disadvantage is they can overthink in moments that require instinct, and they might lack the emotional drive that pushes others through the hardest moments. The invisible hero. This firefighter doesn't want recognition. They don't post about their job. They don't need thanks. They're doing this because it's right, because someone has to, because they can. The advantage is pure motivation. They're not doing this for ego. The disadvantage is they can be emotionally isolated. They don't share the burden. They don't process the trauma, and that can destroy them quietly. Here's what all these types share. They've decided that someone else's life is worth risking their own for. The motivation varies, but the outcome is the same. When the alarm sounds, they go. But the healthiest firefighters are the ones who've integrated multiple motivations. They honor tradition, but they're not trapped by it. They want to help, but they're not reckless. They value the team, but they can think independently. They seek challenge, but they respect danger. And they have something outside of firefighting that matters to them. Family, hobbies, faith, something that reminds them why survival is important. Because if firefighting is your only source of meaning, you'll take risks you shouldn't, you'll stay too long, you'll burn out. The best firefighters are the ones who can run into the fire and run back out, who save lives without losing their own, who understand that heroism isn't about dying for someone, it's about living for them, being there the next time, and the time after that. Because one heroic death saves one person, but a long career saves hundreds. Let's talk about what nobody sees. The psychological cost of running toward danger over and over again. Trauma accumulation. Every call is an exposure to potential trauma. Dead bodies, burned children, families screaming, people you couldn't save. And these exposures don't just disappear. They accumulate. They stack up in your nervous system. Some firefighters develop PTSD, not from one event, but from the cumulative weight of hundreds. They have nightmares, intrusive thoughts, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, but they often don't seek help because the culture sees vulnerability as weakness. Then there's vicarious trauma. This is trauma from witnessing others suffering. You absorb the pain of every victim, every family member, every tragedy. And over time, it changes you. You become cynical, detached. You stop feeling as deeply because feeling deeply is too painful. Moral injury is another hidden wound. This happens when you're forced to make impossible choices. Do you save the person closest to the exit or the one deepest in? Do you risk your crew to save someone who might already be dead? These decisions haunt firefighters. Even when they made the right call, the weight of the choice lingers. There's also survivor's guilt. When a colleague dies and you don't. When you save one person but not another. The question, why them and not me? Or, could I have done more? Can become obsessive, and without processing, it turns into depression. The loss of colleagues is particularly devastating. Firefighters form bonds deeper than most friendships. When someone dies in the line of duty, it's not just grief. It's a fundamental rupture. You trusted that person with your life. You depended on them. And now they're gone. And you wonder if you'll be next? Some firefighters cope by emotional suppression. They shut down. They don't talk about what they've seen. They don't process. They just compartmentalize and keep moving. This works short-term. But long-term, it leads to emotional numbness, relationship problems, and sometimes complete psychological breakdown. Substance abuse is common. Alcohol to numb, drugs to escape. It's self-medication for unprocessed trauma, and the culture often enables it. We all drink. It's how we decompress. But there's a line between social drinking and dependency, and many firefighters cross it without realizing. There's also the impact on relationships. Partners and families bear the secondary burden. They live with someone who's seen things they can't talk about, who's emotionally unavailable, who has nightmares, who can't be fully present because they're always mentally preparing for the next call. Divorce rates are high. Not because firefighters don't love their families, but because the job takes so much that there's not much left for home. And partners feel like they're competing with the firehouse, and they usually lose. Identity issues also emerge. Many firefighters build their entire sense of self around the job. When injury or age forces retirement, they don't know who they are anymore. Depression, suicide risk, and substance abuse all spike post-retirement because the purpose is gone. Then there's compassion fatigue. You can only witness suffering for so long before you stop feeling it. This is the mind's defense mechanism, but it means you become desensitized. You stop crying at scenes that would destroy most people. And while that helps you function, it also alienates you from your humanity. Some firefighters also develop hypervigilance that extends beyond work. They can't relax at restaurants because they're scanning for exits. They can't enjoy movies with fire scenes. They see danger everywhere. Their nervous system is stuck in threat detection mode. And here's the cruelest part. Many firefighters suffer in silence. They think asking for help is weakness. They think admitting struggle means they're not cut out for the job. So they keep it inside, and they break quietly. Suicide rates among firefighters are higher than the general population, higher even than line-of-duty deaths. They survive the fires but can't survive the weight of what they've carried. Not all firefighters experience these costs. Some have strong support systems. Some process trauma healthily. Some find balance. But many don't. And the culture is only now starting to recognize that mental health is as important as physical fitness. Peer support programs are emerging. Critical incident stress debriefings, access to therapy. But there's still stigma. Still the belief that talking about feelings is soft. The truth is, running toward danger requires immense strength. But so does asking for help. And the firefighters who do both, who can be brave in the fire and vulnerable in the firehouse, those are the ones who last. Because heroism isn't just about saving others. Sometimes it's about saving yourself. So why do they do it? Why, knowing all the costs, do firefighters keep running toward danger? The answer is simple and profound. Purpose. Firefighters have something most people spend their whole lives searching for. They have clarity about why they exist. They know, with absolute certainty, that their work matters. Not in an abstract way. In a tangible, immediate life-or-death way. Every shift there's a possibility they'll save a life. And that possibility is enough, because saving one life, just one, justifies everything. The training, the risk, the trauma, the sacrifice. Meaning is one of the most powerful psychological forces in human existence. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote that humans can endure almost anything if they have a strong enough why. Firefighters have that why. It's not money, it's not fame, it's the knowledge that they're doing something that truly matters. And that meaning creates resilience. It buffers against trauma. It provides context for suffering. When you've had a terrible call, when you've seen something horrific, you can still get up the next day because you know that today might be the day you save someone. And that possibility makes it worth it. There's also identity. Being a firefighter isn't just what they do, it's who they are. And that identity is a source of pride. They're part of a lineage of heroes stretching back generations. They wear the uniform with honor, and that honor sustains them through the hard parts. The brotherhood is another source of meaning. Firefighters don't just work together. They live together. They eat together. They suffer together. They celebrate together. And those bonds are deeper than most friendships because they're forged in shared danger. When you trust someone with your life, when you've been through hell together, that creates a connection that's almost familial. And for many firefighters, the firehouse is more home than their actual home. The crew is more family than their actual family, and that belonging is psychologically sustaining. Then there's the immediate feedback. Most jobs, you don't know if you're making a difference. But firefighters know. They pull someone out of a burning building. They save a family. They see the direct result of their actions. And that immediate, visible impact is profoundly satisfying. Compare that to most modern work, where you're producing reports, attending meetings, contributing to a system so large and complex that your individual impact is invisible. Firefighters don't have that problem. Their work is concrete, real, undeniable. There's also the challenge. Firefighting is hard, physically, mentally, emotionally. And for people who are wired to seek challenge, that difficulty is rewarding. They're not going through the motions, they're testing themselves, pushing their limits. And growth, real growth, comes from challenge. And finally, there's legacy. Firefighters know that what they do will be remembered by the people they save, by their families, by the community. They're building a legacy of service, and that legacy outlives them. They also know that they're setting an example for their kids, for recruits, for society. They're proving that heroism is real, that selflessness exists, that in a world that can feel selfish and cruel, there are still people who will run into the fire to save you. And that matters, not just for the people they save, but for everyone who witnesses it. Because it restores faith in humanity, it reminds us that we're capable of extraordinary courage. So yes, there are costs, trauma, loss, sacrifice. But firefighters will tell you it's worth it. Not because they don't feel the pain, but because the purpose is bigger than the pain. They've found something worth suffering for, something worth risking everything for. And in a culture where many people struggle to find meaning, where depression and anxiety are epidemic, where so many feel like their lives don't matter, firefighters have the opposite problem. They have so much meaning that it sometimes overwhelms them. But given the choice, most wouldn't trade it. Because at the end of the day, when they lie down to sleep, they know they did something that mattered. They know they made the world a little safer. They know that someone is alive because of them. And that knowledge, that purpose, is worth more than comfort, more than safety, more than a long, easy life. Because a long, easy life without meaning is just existence. But a life lived in service, even if it's shorter, even if it's harder, is a life fully lived. And that's what firefighters understand. Running toward danger isn't about being fearless, it's about believing that saving a life is more important than preserving your own comfort. It's about choosing purpose over safety, connection over isolation, meaning over ease. And in a world that desperately needs more of that, firefighters stand as a reminder of what humans are capable of when we choose to be brave. If this moved you, share it. Honor the firefighters in your community. And if you want more explorations of human courage and resilience, subscribe. Because these stories matter. And the people who live them deserve to be understood.